MMI interviews. So if you're watching this video, I assume you know what they are, but essentially they stand for multiple mini interviews, and they're one type of interview you could be faced with if you're applying to medicine. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Jack and I'm a first year medical student studying at UCL. And in this video, I'm just going to give you guys a quick few tips on how you can best prepare for MMIs and some things that you should definitely keep in mind when getting closer to your interview date or when thinking about how to prepare. Hopefully this video will be quick and to the point, and as usual, timestamps will be in the description so you can jump around and find exactly what you're looking for. And obviously don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all of that. The first thing I want to mention is the timings. Now, from my own experience and what I've seen, the majority of MMI stations for medical interviews will range between 5 to 8 minutes. Now they'll definitely tell you beforehand, so make sure you keep in mind the timing of the answers you're giving. For this reason, it's extremely important that you do timed practice. What I'd recommend is if you're doing interview prep with someone else, then after they ask the question, make sure to tell them beforehand that they should start a timer, just so you can get an idea of how long you're taking. General rule is that if you're taking too long, so if your answer is literally lasting 8 minutes, then there's a high likelihood that you're rambling, and it could very well be that you're either repeating points or finding really long-winded ways of saying something that could otherwise be said much simpler. On the other hand, if your answer is too short, so let's say your answer is not even 2 minutes long, then there's also a high likelihood that you're maybe either speaking too fast or you're not mentioning all the details that you should. Details that could potentially make your answer sound so much better. Now, both of these can kind of happen as a result of stress. When you're stressed, you might forget what you're saying and you might end up rambling and take too long. And on the other hand, if you're stressed, you might also kind of forget important details, or you might start speaking really fast because you're stressed and you can't think straight, and then your answers are all over the place. So definitely do time practice. Now, don't worry if some of your answers are naturally shorter than others and some are longer. This isn't a hard and fast rule where you need to be bang on the middle. Some answers will genuinely be a bit longer and some will just be a bit shorter. But it's important that you practice and you make sure that the length of your answer isn't because you're either stressed and talking too much or you're stressed and not talking enough. One thing that might also help you identify if there's any issues is to just record yourself speaking to a camera as if it's the interviewer. It might seem quite unnatural at first, but it's a good way to gauge the type of content you're talking about when answering the questions. The next thing I want you to keep in mind, and the thing that you've most definitely heard a lot, but I'm just going to reiterate it, is that each station gives you a fresh start. This is honestly such a blessing, because if you've ever done a traditional interview, then you know the stress of kind of messing up on a question and that anxiety from that one question following on through to your other question. And the main reason for that is because you're under the impression that, or you feel as though you've already left a bad image to the interviewer. Now with MMIs, thankfully every station you'll most likely get a different person kind of asking you the question. What this means is they have no clue how you did in the last panel or the last station. Even if you did really well, they won't know. Even if you completely bottled it, they won't know. So use that to your advantage. Don't get too complacent. So if you did really well, don't get too laid back, because remember, you have to start afresh with this new interviewer. And likewise, if you don't do as well as you thought you should have in the last station, make sure that for the new one you're approaching it with the mindset that you get a fresh start. It works both ways. So if you do really well, don't get complacent. If you do really bad, don't be disheartened. You have a fresh start with every station you go to. The next advice is to be comfortable with jumping between question types. Now realistically, this is the case for a standard interview as well, especially if you're doing a panel interview. Then one moment you might get an ethics question, one moment you might get a scenario based question, all sorts of different question styles. But just keep that in mind that MMIs are quite unique in some of the questions they ask. A lot of medical schools now have adopted MMIs, and beyond just a regular standard interview style question, they also have a variety of different types, and the most common being role play style questions. A lot of people aren't very, or don't find those type of questions very natural. It's very weird to pretend to be someone else and kind of be part of a scenario, but it's definitely worth practicing for those questions because they're quite challenging to people who haven't practiced them that much. I think the hardest thing about practicing roleplay though is a lot of the times you're doing them with your friends, and when you're kind of in a role play scenario with your friends, it's very easy to break character and start laughing. I've personally done role play practice with a lot of my friends who are applying to medicine, and I can tell you firsthand that it's very hard to try not to laugh and kind of break character, but it is something you just have to practice. I guess a bit of advice, or maybe something that could help you, is to maybe do it with a teacher or someone who's a lot older than you, and that way you might get a more professional vibe when doing the interview prep. But yeah, be prepared to do that. One moment you'll be talking about your motivations for medicine, the next moment you'll be in a role play scenario giving someone advice about how to apply to university. You can never be certain. And also bear in mind that a lot of role plays sometimes don't really link to medicine. They're more so looking for certain skills that you have. So for example, they want you to show that you're empathetic. They want you to show them that you're kind, that you're able to assess the situation. So you might get a scenario that's totally unrelated to medicine or university. So an example I can give you is I recently did some interview prep with someone who's applying to medical school, one of my friends, and the scenario I gave him was to imagine that he's mentoring someone who's applying to university and that they've asked him for advice about what they should do. And you can see in that scenario, although it's not directly linked to a medical context, there are skills in that scenario that are applicable to medicine, so that's what they're looking for. And lastly, keep up to date with relevant topics. This is the case for MMIs or panel interviews, but a lot of MMI stations might do something like give you a news article headline and ask you to elaborate on it, or they'll ask you about your opinion on a certain kind of, event that's gone on. Obviously now at the time of making this video, the most prominent thing is the pandemic, so chances are if you're watching this now, then that is what you should be making sure you've read up on. But also just make sure you're kind of keeping up to date with things here and there. That doesn't mean you have to know everything in detail, but just to show them that one, you're kind of proactive, you're on top of things, but also just in case they bring you up in a question, you'll be completely prepared. In my opinion, the best thing to do is one, to watch the news obviously, but also just go on to BBC Health. So I'll leave a link to that down below, and if you check out BBC Health, then you'll find that if you go to their homepage, a lot of the stuff there is going to be like new things that have come up or new discoveries, or maybe some of the newer research that's being looked into, and just even glancing at the BBC Health homepage can give you a lot of information about some of the hot topics at the moment. One thing I used to do in the build up to my interviews is I used to literally open my phone and I used to just, in like the Google feature where you can like give voice commands, I used to activate that and just say, tell me the news. And Google had this really cool feature where they'd give you a 5-minute summary of the morning news. And especially during the start of the pandemic, which was around when I was preparing for my interviews, it was really useful to stay up to date on, the development of the pandemic and how the virus was spreading. And I found that really let me stay informed because it was a really quick thing. I used to just chuck my headphones in, and as I was getting ready for school, I would just be listening to it in the background. And that's about it. So obviously this video is quite brief. It's kind of made with the assumption that you have some idea about what an MMI is, and it's more so just to kind of give you some advice and things you should definitely consider before the interview. Now, if you've got an interview coming up, best of luck. I'm sure if you're watching this video, then you're probably someone who's doing a lot of research or kind of looking about and getting as much information as you can. So I'm sure you do perfectly fine. Just make sure to be yourself, be genuine, try not to be someone you're not, and just keep in mind some of the things I've mentioned in this video. Just for reference, I did an MMI with St. George's and I got an offer for their medical school, so I have had experience with MMIs and know that they can still be stressful, even though they're meant to be a bit of a different style of interview that's a bit less kind of formal, if you will. But still, if you have any questions, ask them below. I'll do my best to get back to you and answer them. That's been all from me, and goodbye. There were times when I